And Joanne, I don't think you need to spend too much time, but give us a heads up on where we are and what's going on, what you're seeing. But I don't think you need to do the whole 9 yards unless you want to.
Yeah, I've got some good news about how we're tracking at the moment, and then I just want to cover some frequently asked questions because I'm tired of answering them.
Good. Okay, I'm about to let everybody in, okay? Here we go. Good evening, everyone. This is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We're letting people in just now, so welcome. Thank you for joining us on such a beautiful day. This is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. If you're just joining us, you found the right place. We're letting people in. It takes a little while for Zoom to let people in the door, so we'll take a couple of minutes. Welcome, everyone. Just letting people in. Welcome, everyone. This is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. You found the right place. Good evening, everyone. We're just waiting for folks to arrive. Takes a couple of minutes for Zoom to let people in the door. We see people come in. When we hit the magic number of 40, we'll get going. Going to start in just a minute. Okay, we've hit the magic number of 40, and I expect others will join us as they get here. But good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Losack. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. I'm joined this evening with the chair of my board, William Roberts, with the deputy director of Housing and Community Affairs, Frank Desmarais, the manager of the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs, Rosie McCray Moody, Joanna Miller, who is managing our rent relief program for the COVID rent relief program. And I also expect that Council President Tom Hucker will be joining us later in our discussion. We are recording, and this will be live on YouTube. So if you like our remarks and want to hear them twice, you're more than welcome to go to YouTube and hear it again. If there are other people that you think should hear this information, you can point them to the YouTube link and let them know that it's available to them with information about everything we're going to talk about tonight, having to do with voter registration and the importance of renters voting about the COVID rent relief program and eviction prevention, renters' rights and code enforcement, and any other issue related to renting that you'd like to ask or raise concerns about. We ask that you put any question or concern in the chat. That's where we will look and we will address questions as we go. But with that, I'd like to welcome my Board of Directors Chair, William Roberts, if you'd like to say a few opening remarks about where we are and what we're facing in the coming months. William?
Can you hear me? Okay, sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you all again. Hey, Frank and Rosie and Joanna, good to see you all. Thanks once again for joining us, for those who are back for more of the discussion, and hello to folks who are newly joining us tonight to get some updated information about the county's rent relief program and to talk about what's going on and what's facing renters. As Matt said, I'm Will Roberts, the chair of the Renters Alliance board. For those of you who don't know, and hopefully you do know since you're with us, but if you're watching and you don't, the Renters Alliance is the only organization in the county dedicated exclusively, and in our region really, dedicated exclusively to tenant outreach, advocacy, and education. And we sort of work, well, we work in multiple streams, but the main streams are, as you'll hear tonight, we work with partners at the state and county level to do direct outreach, early and direct outreach to tenants. That is sort of the main impetus and focus of the Renters Alliance, even pre-COVID, and certainly during COVID. We believe that the worst time for a tenant to learn about their rights is when they are facing eviction in court. And so our mission is to get to tenants early with information, empowering you hopefully to be able to know your rights, and also to keep you out of the eviction pipeline, and also to connect you up with programs and services that do just that. And so, we continue to believe that early outreach and education is a key to keeping people out of that eviction pipeline and keeping people in their homes, especially as we deal with the continued fallout from the pandemic. And the other aspect of our work is certainly on the policy front. As Matt alluded to, we have been involved in this fight during COVID at the state level and at the local level. And sorry, you might hear my 3-year-old in the background, dinner time. But we've been involved at the state level and the local level to really impress upon our policymakers the need to get, not just to get rent relief out to people, but to get it out early. We know, and we'll get into that discussion here, I think, with our partners, and certainly when Council President Hucker joins us. But we know that due to some of the federal emergency programs that have come down the pipe, there's funding to be able to help keep people in their homes. And so we're trying to make sure that we can link you up with that to keep you in your homes. And, as Matt said, we know what folks are facing. We know as the calendar, we get close to the end of July and get into August, we know that we are approaching the times at which the federal CDC moratorium or protections will expire. We know that folks have been anxiously watching what's happening at the state level, as the governor signaled that he was going to end the emergency declarations and then put that back on. And so, we've been staying abreast of the multiple levels of protection for renters and affirmative defenses that renters could avail themselves of to stay in their homes. And we remain concerned, both about getting close to the point when these protections are going to expire. And we also, frankly, remain concerned that the folks like the people who've joined this call, and many that we know, tenants, make up well over 40% of our population here, might not get to the relief in time. We want to make sure that you get it in time. We want to make sure, that our governments, county, state, are able to get the federal money out the door before we have to give any money back. And so, we've been sort of positioned right in the middle of those conversations, trying to move that process along and work constructively with partners. And so you'll hear again more tonight from the folks at DHCA and HHS about some of the programs at the county level and how you can avail yourselves of that. But the last thing I'd say, if you or someone is at risk of eviction or have questions, you should definitely make sure to jot down the information that you hear on this call tonight and reach out. But you can also feel free to reach out to us at the Renters Alliance as well. And so, Matt, with that, I think I'll turn it over. I'm sure we'll get into lots of that discussion as the evening goes on, but welcome. Thanks again for being with us and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, William. That's William Roberts, chair of our board and a leader in renter activism in our community, and we always appreciate his expertise. And you also served on the Commission for Landlord and Tenant Affairs at one time, I believe.
I did. I'm one of Rosie's crew.
Rosie's crew. You've been
always,
trained.
Always good to see. Always good to see Rosie. So absolutely.
Good. Thank you very much, William. Let me also just suggest to the people who are listening, we had a Superior event run by East County Service Center at the Enclave Saturday afternoon into the evening. It was a community building event, included a number of resources for renters, for food, for vaccine access, for health and human services, to provide information and application services for the COVID rent relief program. The Renters Alliance was there offering information on renters' rights, supporting the vaccine efforts and the COVID rent relief efforts, as well as promoting what we do in terms of helping renters with their disputes and issues with their landlords, and giving them information about how to avail themselves of resources. If your community would like to do something like this, let us know. It's going to be critical in the coming months. We know that the eviction crisis is looking at thousands of Montgomery County residents who are behind in their rent and may lose their homes. We know that and Joanna Miller can fill us in on this when it's her turn, but we know that the county has received 8,000 plus applications, but we believe that there are many thousands, maybe twice as many, that have not yet availed themselves of the rent relief program, who are out there who are in arrears. And we are afraid that their homes may be at risk too. And so how do we reach them? How do we make sure that they understand what to do, how to apply, how to be guided to these resources? Many people don't have the same digital access that all of you have if you're on this webinar. They don't understand the application process. Maybe they don't speak English. Maybe they don't have an education enough to understand how to engage government services. Maybe they're just afraid. Maybe they're just overwhelmed. Whatever it is, evictions are far more damaging than just to the single family that's evicted. That's disaster enough. But evictions have a ripple effect throughout whole communities and cost us financially and in humanitarian costs. The social costs, the social safety net costs, crime, loss of academic achievement, increased risk to mental health. These are all going to be financial and human costs that we will all bear. So we all have to think about, if you're not facing eviction, maybe someone in your community is, or maybe a lot of people in your community are. Get in touch with us. Let's see what we can do in the coming months to do direct, personal, early outreach in your community, so that we can stem this eviction tide before people end up in court. As William said, we believe that the worst place to learn about your rights and your eviction diversion options is the day you arrive in eviction court. So reach out to us. I don't see our council president just now, so I think what I'll do is turn it over to the Deputy Director of Housing, Frank Desmarais, if you want to give us an overview on where things stand. Frank?
Thank you, Matt, and Will, and thank you everybody that's here with us this evening. I think I'll start with reiterating what you were just hearing, that this is something that across the county, it's affecting many, many communities, and it's hard hitting some very vulnerable communities. So the hardest thing we have going right now is getting the word out. We have resources available you'll be hearing about shortly, but we are interested and will ask for your assistance in reaching others in your building, community, circle, that the information you're hearing tonight, we'll ask you to help us spread that. First, I'm Frank Demaray, the Deputy Director of Housing and Community Affairs, and our responsibilities include supporting all tenants and landlords in maintaining safe, secure, and affordable housing. Rental assistance right now is the #1 priority. It's available, and you'll be hearing about how to get access to it. But one of the things we want to be very clear about is you're not alone in trying to figure this out. It can be complicated. The website has an application, but there is assistance. Matt is speaking to Renters Alliance as an available resource, and please reach out to Renters Alliance if you have any questions or how to access this, what else is available. The county has a special webpage that's the main county webpage, Montgomery County MD.gov/renters. When you go to that, you'll see a list of available resources and particularly available support organizations. So in addition to Renters Alliance, there's organizations available to help with understanding, to provide support to you and your specific building and community. So please reach out to the resources. Also, you'll see there that the county has legal assistance available to anyone facing an eviction action. Anyone that has received a court notice, a summons to court, scheduling of a court date. The county has support, specifically free legal assistance. Again, at that Montgomery County MD.gov/renters. We'll put this in the chat, but that's available. That'll have the phone numbers and the organizations to contact. So I'll start with that resource. In addition to that, you'll hear from Rosie McCray Moody with the Department of Housing and Community Affairs on the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs, the range of support and services and the kinds of tenants' rights and information that they can support. We also support housing code enforcement. During the pandemic, we had limitations and still have some concerns about entering units. We will work with any tenant about entering units safely, but we are responding to all code complaints, and we are restarting all of our previously regular scheduled controlled property and other scheduled property inspections, again, in connection with communicating with the residents and working to maintain physical and health safety. So what I want to open everybody up with is that the county is open, operating, available. Our offices are open for those that choose to come in by web, by phone, by calling 311. You have access to a lot of resources. And shortly you'll be hearing more about those resources. So Matt, if you'd like, we can address more, or if you need to shift.
I think, thanks, Frank. I think that Council President Hucker may be with us. If you are, please appear. If you're having some technical difficulties, we can move on to the next thing, but I see your office is on. If you are here, we will go to you, and we can always go to you the moment you do appear. So we will go on, I think, to Rosie McCray Moody, if that's all right with you, Frank. And we will interrupt you, Rosie, as you often have me do when Council President Hucker appears.
I don't really have anything new to tell you. We're in the process of updating the landlord tenant handbook, and we're putting in all the new laws that have taken effect over the last year or so regarding landlord tenant. The law about air conditioning, the law about window guards, the law that was passed about criminal background checks. And it's really a human rights law but it still needs to be in your lease that the landlord has certain restrictions regarding what he can check, what he can hold against you in a criminal background check. There's a new window guard bill coming into effect of January 1st, I think, 2022, where if you live above ground and you have children who are 10 years old or younger, you have the right to have a window guard in your window. Landlord, put it in at the landlord's expense. And there'll be an addendum that will be attached to your lease saying that you give permission for them to put it in. And they have to ask you that every time they renew your lease. You have to get a new window guard, or every time they raise your rent, you have to get that addendum and say, yes, I want it, or no, I want it. And even if you don't have children under 10, you can still request window guards and they have to put them in. And I think it's one more.
I think you want to talk about the rent stabilization situation.
That is eluding me. Right now, the state of emergency is still in effect, according to the governor. And as long as the state of emergency remains in effect, rents cannot exceed the voluntary rent guideline, which is currently 1.4%. So any rent increases you get in the next few months will still be 1.4%. And even if it ends August the 31st, they would still have to wait 90 days before they could give you a notice that would raise your rent higher than the voluntary rent guidelines. So it would be 90 days from the date that it was raised, and then another 90 days because you have to get 90-day notice of a rent increase. So basically 181 days after the emergency ends, your rent can exceed the voluntary rent guidelines. So right now it's still in effect. So 1.4 is the limit. And I don't think that's it. So the handbook should be ready around mid-August and we'll upload it as soon as it's finished.
Well, Rosie, you don't get off that easy. There's actually a few more things. You
Okay.
do need to, we are in an eviction crisis, so can you please remind everybody and tell people who don't know this, the difference between the process for eviction, the difference between a notice to vacate and a court summons, and that process, so that people know what they're looking at if they're in jeopardy.
You can only be evicted through the court. So just because the landlord says get out or you owe me money, I want you to leave, doesn't mean you have to. The court is the only person that can evict you, and the sheriff has to be present. So if your landlord gives you a notice and says you're behind in your rent, he needs to take you to court and you need to apply for whatever you're eligible for to get help. And there's the Renters Alliance, there's CASA, there's LEDC, there's HCI, HIP. There are organizations around to help you access whatever programs are available, mainly HHS's program, to get help with that back rent. And if you are in jeopardy, if your landlord is taking you to court and you've already applied for rental assistance, you need to notify rental assistance right away and upload that information, because they're making people who are in danger of eviction their priority. So if you have that notice, or you've gotten the red and white, or you've gotten a warrant of restitution, please let them know that right away so they can work on your information, push you kind of to the front, because they have lots and lots of applications. And if you want yours done as fast as is possible, then let them know if there's a change. And an eviction is a process. You have to be taken to, that was the new law I didn't tell you about. Effective October 1st, the landlord has to give you 10 days notice before he can sue you for failure to pay rent. I knew it was something I couldn't. So that's effective October 1st. It's a form that the court is making up right now. So As soon as we get a copy of it, we'll post it on our website because the court is developing the form. So I can't tell you what it looks like because I don't know. But the landlord has to give it to you before he can sue you for failure to pay rent. And what'll probably happen is on the 2nd of the month, he'll probably start sending those things out saying in 10 days, if you haven't paid, we're going to sue you. But it gives you a little time, and you are entitled to, the other part of that law is you are entitled to legal representation. So right now, legal aid is in the courthouse. And once this law takes effect, legal aid or somebody will be in the courthouse at all times to help you, just giving you information. They may not be able to represent you in court, but they'll be able to advise you and give you information about your case. And right now, the self-help center is now the help center, and there's a lawyer on duty in the courthouse daily from the help center and from legal aid. So that's all, that's helpful. So you need to know. And again, and we tell you this every time we do this, if you get a notice, if you get a court notice, go to court. Always go to court, because you can't raise a defense or help yourself if you don't go and say something. And if you do not go, you lose automatically. And it makes it that much harder for us to help you, or for HHS to help you. You're making it harder for yourself. So please go to court.
And Rosie, can you explain again for us who don't know what the difference between OLTA and code is and how they can file a complaint?
Landlord-tenant affairs is basically concerned with your rights under the lease. You know, did you get your security deposit? Is the landlord coming in your unit without giving you notice? Is the landlord asking you to do something that your lease says you're not responsible for, or pay for something that the lease says you are not responsible for? That's landlord-tenant. If you have mice or something, your sink is dripping, that's housing code enforcement. So if you need a repair, that's housing code enforcement. If you think that your lease terms are being violated, that's landlord-tenant.
Matt, before we shift to touching on code, I just want to close on the CDC protection and the governor's eviction protection. What Rosie's speaking to about showing up in court, even though the CDC order, which provides a eviction protection for the duration of the order, runs out on the 31st of July, there is a governor's order which allows any tenant that can demonstrate in writing with paperwork to a judge in court that they've suffered loss of income due to COVID. They can get a delay of an enforcement of an eviction action at least until August 15. There's no expectation that either of those will be extended again. They're both positioned as, you know, these are final expirations, but you still should be showing up in court, exercising those options if available to you. But as Rosie said, and if you don't show up and there's free legal assistance when you do show up, you will have a summary or default judgment against you. And if you show up, there's an opportunity to begin working out with the landlord, or maybe other defenses available that you're not familiar with, and the attorneys that are there will help you access that. So I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Frank. Do we have Council President Tom Hucker with us? I see his staff well represented, but I can't tell if one of those is Tom Hucker. If it is, we'll go right to you.
Sorry, he's in the attendee link. He's going to be joining in 1 second. Sorry.
Very good. Well, as soon as he does, we'll turn to him.
But at least 3 members of his staff are also on too. So
we see that he's well represented by his staff. That's good. We're glad to know you are working late into the wee hours. But in the meantime, Frank, did you want to go to code?
Yeah, we have Keen Nickel with our code department to just help clarify what you were just asking about, which is how to reach us and what support we provide.
Good evening, everyone. So as Frank mentioned, I'm with the code enforcement section in Housing Department, Housing Community Affairs. We, as Rosie And Frank mentioned earlier, we've resumed our interior inspections. So our staff is out in the field doing those inspections. For the prior year, we'd been focused on the exterior. We're now going back into the interior. So as you can imagine, we're playing catch up. We've got a backlog of inspections that we're doing. We also too actually have been experiencing now with the the lifting of all the regulations, the masking mandates and the social distancing and everything else, an influx in calls. So we have a lot more service calls that are coming in. I think a lot of people probably, worried about people coming in, wasn't saying a lot, but we are actually getting lots of calls. Also mentioned that the window guard law is going into effect at the beginning of the year. We are closing in on the regulations for those, and advance notice has been going out to property owners. We're actually already getting calls, some of them eager to get these things installed, wanting to know the specifications. So those specifications will soon be available. And as mentioned earlier, always, if you've got an issue with any type of property maintenance inside your apartment, please call 311, and one of our inspectors usually will call you within 24 hours to determine whether or not an inspection's need to be made right away, or to schedule something with you.
Keen, we have a lot of questions on code, but we have the very valuable time and attendance of our council president, Tom Hucker. So if you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt you just now to go to our council president, who's been gracious in last minute giving us some time to talk about something that's very important to all of us. And that's renter engagement in the electoral process. Council President Hucker, we understand that you opened an early voting center this week and can give us some information and inspiration to get renters registered.
Sure, Matt. Thanks. You sure you want to fit me in now? I could wait for Keen, but
no, come on.
Okay, it's your show. Let me pulling back up to my notes here. Sorry, I had an attendee link, so I could hear you, but I think you couldn't hear me. Thanks everybody. Thanks, Matt, for having me today and all your board. And thanks so much to Rosie and Frank and Keen for all the work you do for our tenants every day. And I'm really glad you're talking about the window guard bill. I worked very hard on that as the sponsor. We actually even passed county legislation to rename it Ezekiel's Law, after Ezekiel Gumezi, who sadly was the most recent toddler to fall out of a window to his death, this time in Tacoma Park. We've had several fatal falls in Montgomery County, as well as others where children experienced very serious injuries from something as avoidable as falling out of an apartment window. So it was really nice to find out that there's a very simple and affordable solution out there, and to pass legislation through the council unanimously that now, as Rosie described, requires all the landlords to install these window guards wherever there's a child under 10, and also allows even grandparents and neighbors and family members and others who might be caring for a child, once in a while, or babysitting, to request them as well. Thanks, Frank and Rosie and Keen, for implementing that bill. I think it's going to very clearly save lives in Montgomery County. But yes, I also wanted to just thank the Renters Alliance generally. There's 300,000 renters in Montgomery County, and you would never guess that from the testimony we get on multiple issues in Montgomery County, or from the people who show up at public hearings. It's probably no surprise to you that we tend to hear from people with the sort of privilege that aren't working 1 or 2 or 3 jobs, who are likely to be homeowners and likely to have time on their hands to come to Rockville and talk to us. So it's really critical that we have an organization like the Renters Alliance to provide your voice to us, so we make better decisions in renter issues. And that leads me to the topic you asked me to speak about, which is voting. As Matt will tell you, you don't get what you want in life, you get what you organize and win through community organizing and political action. And it's very critical that you all not just organize and testify and send letters and emails to the county council, but that you vote. I've been pushing for an early voting center in White Oak for, I guess, at least 3 years now. You all follow the news. You know there's a national campaign to suppress the vote. That's not new, and it's not. Maryland is not immune to it. Several years ago, my first year on the council, the Board of Elections in Montgomery County decided to close the Burtonsville Early Voting Center and the what was the other one? I guess the Bethesda, the Chevy Chase Early Voting Center, and move the Chevy Chase one out to North Potomac, far from transit, and move the Burtonsville Center to Olney. Burtonsville at the time was the second highest performing voting center, early voting center in the county, and the most popular one for African Americans. And the Board of Election, in their not wisdom, stupidity, decided to take it away from a very important community that needed that early voting center and move it to Olney. So we fought back, and we went to the state board and eventually got that decision reversed. Well, the same thing is happening with early voting. There have never been enough early voting centers. When I served in the General Assembly, there wasn't even any early voting allowed under state law, and we were able to pass that. And it's become more and more popular and well used by our voters. So we should give people what they want, more early voting centers, and we should make it easier for people to vote. State law restricts how many early voting centers you can have in each county. And when we were allowed to have one more early voting center, a number of us organized to get one in White Oak. Why White Oak? Because it's a population that really needs a convenient center. It's overwhelmingly people of color, overwhelmingly immigrants, 35, 40% of which don't have a car. And so they need a center close to them, because if they were to take transit to the early voting centers in Silver Spring or in Burtonsville, it can take half an hour, 45 minutes. And there are huge lines in Burtonsville and other East County sites on election day, because they never have enough machines, and because so many people want to vote. So we should make it easier for people to vote. We should take the pressure off election day by having an early voting center in White Oak. They had the opportunity to grant that several years ago, and they put it in North Potomac instead, which makes no sense, because that's in a population that's wealthier. It has, everyone there has access to a car, and everyone there has no problem voting, doesn't have to take transit to vote. So we have another chance now. The state legislature, thanks to, if you're in District 20, Delegate Wilkins and Charkoudian and Smith fought for them, and Senator Smith fought for this, and Delegate Moon. And we're able to expand the number of voting centers, early voting centers in Montgomery County again. So many of us are back to the drawing board pushing for White Oak to be chosen this time. The Board of Election, we just held a great event in the White Oak Community Center, where the early voting center should be held. We had numerous elected officials and community leaders speak at it, got a fair amount of media coverage, and the Board of Elections will be meeting on September 18th to decide where the next early voting center is. So I really hope you can help us advocate for an early voting center in White Oak by emailing elections@montgomerycountymd.gov. And I'm sure Jill or Julio or Eric can put that in the chat as well. And you can sign up to testify at the public hearing on September 18th. They'll take public comments like your emails until October 14th. And as I said at the beginning, if you want renter protections, if you want to be able to pass more bills like the air conditioning requirement I passed a few years ago, or the Ezekiel's law to prevent kids from falling out of apartment windows, or the tenant protection law, Mark and I got passed a few years ago, if you want more funding for our housing department so they can have the inspectors they need to do the inspections they need to crack down on landlords that put up with lots of violations of the housing code, we need to get you involved. It starts with voting, and it goes beyond there as well. But you can't vote if we make it too hard for you to vote, which is why we need an early voting center in White Oak. And we hope you'll help us with that fight on September 18th. Thank you.
Hey, Council President Hooker, thank you very much. I know that it sounds so routine to us to talk about voter registration, but if the last 4 years has taught us anything, being active and engaged and choosing elected officials has huge consequences for our lives, huge. And what we're looking at now in an eviction crisis and how the COVID pandemic was managed or mismanaged. All depends on who we entrust to these important positions that we elect people to. So Council President Hucker, we're grateful for your time and attendance and obviously for your championing of those bills. And of course, in additional funding for Department of Housing and Community Affairs to do their work and for funding for the Renters Alliance to do ours.
Absolutely.
So we look forward to your continued support. It actually translates into real life valuable changes for people and empowering of our communities. I can't tell you how, renter communities are some of the most vulnerable communities in our state and county. They're vulnerable to COVID. They're vulnerable to evictions. And as Council President Hucker pointed out, these are the people who have 2 jobs, 3 jobs. These are the people who can't get to voting centers as easily as people in Potomac and Chevy Chase. And so having access to voting is critical for the renter community and for everybody. So again, Council President Hucker, thank you for joining us. And now we'll resume our program with the Office of Housing and Community Affairs. And Keen Nichols, our supervisor at Code, I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but a number of things have come to our attention lately. Keen, if you're with us, turn your camera back on, we'll see you. If you're there,
Yeah,
Matt, I'm gonna fill in if Dean has to step off. Okay.
I'm here.
there he is, he's there.
Yeah. Yeah, I can, let me just step back in. I had a conflict, but I was like, I can step away from people to do this. So,
Hey, and thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So did you said there was some
quick question. One was, we were at the Enclave, which Code has been working on intensely over the last few years. We know that there's over 2,000 code violations in your last assessment of the complex. And can you tell us about elevators? These buildings are seeing elevators that are not working in some buildings around Montgomery County. When elevators break down, people are literally trapped on the upper floors. Can you tell us what renters need to do if the elevator situation is down and there's not quick response?
Yeah, well, they definitely, obviously need to call us. We prioritize those calls. Fortunately, I'm sure it's happened where, all the elevators are down in a building, but that rarely happens. Usually what happens, a building, especially high rise, will have three or four different cars. And if one goes down, and it's, the problem with some of these buildings is they have elevator companies on staff all the time. They're basically like on call. Sometimes when there's a more major problem, then there has to be third-party testing that gets involved. And so that's where the slowdown oftentimes happens. Like the repairs are made, but because of certain repairs, they have to be inspected before they're brought back online. So sometimes we're seeing delays because of that. And then other times delays happen because they're custom-made machinery that's involved, and they have to order parts that just don't have laying around. So that's where we see the most delays. But as far as our response, we'll get on the job right away. And I've never, I am, especially in high rise, by the time we are calling them, several tenants may have called us. They are on the job. It's not like they're not working on it. Unfortunately, some of these buildings are older, and I think that their elevators are in need of more repair. I know that the Enclave last year completed a series of upgrades to their elevators that was malfunctioning on a regular basis. But that work has been completed. I don't know if, yeah. So is there?
As of Saturday, there was apparently a number of problems. But talking systemically here, There's often been confusion about who's responsible for enforcing the maintenance and repair of elevators. And does your department include that enforcement?
Yeah, we will, we require obviously the elevator to be in working order. We're not the ones that inspect it or regulate the permitting of that. That's the state. And so that's where sometimes, and they've got a new process where they've got third party inspectors involved. That red tape we're not involved in. We just tell the property owner, you need to get this back online and you need a permit, and some types of repair. They go through that permitting process, and that's with the state.
Okay. And was there anything
And
else?
the state actually does, proactively, through these third-party vendors inspect on a yearly basis. So they're getting inspected by, the eyes that are the experts for elevators to make sure that, the maintenance, because they're on those inspections, they're constantly calling out like, it needs this, it needs this, it needs this. And before they can get their certification for that year, they're having to do that work. So they do get looked at, beyond code, but when we come across a problem, we do back it up with the tools of enforcement that we have here locally.
And when I interrupted you, you were explaining that code was now going back into buildings directly, that you were catching up. And was there anything else that you'd want to add?
Councilmember Hucker mentioned the fact that it was instrumental in getting that air conditioner bill. That's been really helpful. We have gotten a lot of calls this summer, so and we've got a prioritization. We treat it. I mean, it's obviously not as serious as the lack of heat, but it is a serious thing requiring an emergency response. So our inspectors respond the same day, and we give folks a really short window to get the AC, I should say, back online. But people have been availing themselves of the benefit of that law and getting their apartments a little bit cooler.
So again, for those of us who haven't heard this process as often as we should or don't understand it, when you have a maintenance issue, if your appliances aren't working, if you have a vermin problem, mold, mice, rats, if you have leaky pipes or some other maintenance issue, and Keen, please jump in if I misstate or not accurate in some way, we expect you to immediately inform the property management or the landlord. That's where your first step is. And usually you give them a reasonable period of time. How long should it take to turn around a response or send up a maintenance person to make a repair? But if you find that they're being unresponsive or unreasonable, if you allow it to sit for weeks or months at a time, there's not much anybody can do about it. And the longer you wait, the more you're going to suffer for something that you're paying for. And so that's when you need to contact and file a complaint with the code department. And we ask that you do so because it's a way for the Renters Alliance and policymakers and the council and the executive to keep track of what kind of complaints there are out there. When you file a complaint, it's recorded and they can track it. Keen, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's like you just said. I mean, it's like when these laws are passed, it's good for us to see, how many people are benefiting from the service, and then it helps us to see where we need to focus our resources. We're constantly, improving our technology so that we could, work smarter, not harder, and be of greater service. So having data is very, very important. And this, is one of the big things of this new troubled property. I call it new. It still feels new because we are, we lost a year, and we're still, we're into the second phase or cycle of it. But the point is that, tracking things on a more minute level then gives us a better idea of what housing needs are there, and of course what laws need to be brought on to support, because housing, the way it boomed, and the apartment, is really a new thing the last 50-60 years. There wasn't these high-rise type apartments in communities like ours. But now there is, and these buildings age, and there has to be a way in which they are maintained so that there's good housing stock that's safe, and then not only safe, I mean, it's just well preserved. And this information helps us greatly. So yeah, file the complaints. We can handle it.
One would hope that they're well built too. I was once in a meeting on renters issues with the planning department, and everybody was talking about how old our buildings are and that they're falling in disrepair. And somebody said, well, buildings don't last more than 30, 40 years. And then somebody said, unless you're in Europe, where they last hundreds of years because they were built to last for hundreds of years. But that aside, Frank Desmarais or Keen, does anybody want to give us a brief overview of where we are with the chronic problem code enforcement program, the priorities list? Where are we with that? How is that coming back? And will code or DHCA be listing the troubled properties that are on that list publicly?
Keen, if you don't mind, just give the status report.
Yeah, so with the troubled properties, there was an assessment every cycle. When I say cycle, it's a 3-year period in which we complete the inspections. We were set to complete in June of 2020, but March happened with COVID and everything getting shut down. So those 3 months of inspections that we had lined up, we just now have been able to, start, in the last, 30, 45 days or something, going through those and getting caught up on those ones. Once we complete that, then we'll be able to compute the scoring and then determine who has, is eligible to come off, if they're eligible to come off, and who actually is coming on, because in this last 3 years, there are new apartment complex that may have not have met the bar. So they might be new. So there'll be some that come off because they did better. The other thing that, of course, has slowed down this process is because the property owners and managers had to give us, core reports of their service requests or calls that they received if they were on the troubled list. And the other thing that they needed to do is to get us their corrective action plan. As you can, everyone's systems, went haywire, and them getting those reports back to us was slow. And of course, us, this being new and us having to juggling things, having to follow up and check and make sure those reports got back to us. So we're in the process of finishing up the inspections, and then we'll be, determining which ones are going to be new, which ones are coming off, and we'll have that up. I don't have a hard date as far as when that's going to be completely finalized. My guess and hope is that we would have it sometime in, I don't want to say, but at least I'm hoping by the end of September.
So this fall, sometime this fall.
Yeah, sometime this fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's fair. We've been
assuming that everything holds and the pandemic doesn't take a
we have learned to rock and roll. Yes.
Yeah.
But standard wise, code inspects every property once every 3 years, sometimes 10%, sometimes 25%, 50%, or 100%. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So 25% is the minimum. 10% was prior to the, these new laws that came into effect in 2017. But yeah, 25, 50, or 100%. And usually smaller buildings, regardless if they're once every 3 years, we'll still do 4 units on those because they're just so small. The at-risk properties, those are the ones like in between what we call quote unquote compliant and troubled. So you have compliant, which is like, hey, you're doing a relatively good job because you have a low number or instance of violations, and the violations that we do find are not severe. So that's what would put you in this compliant zone. The at risk is like, well, you're getting close to that trouble threshold where we see an increase, an uptick in number of violations per unit, and the severity has increased as well. Those are subject to being inspected every 2 years. And we usually are choosing 50% or 100% on those, depending upon, we look at also to the number of complaints that we've received at a complex. So there's some that, not in the troubled list, but are at risk. And we make the decision to go ahead and just do 100% because we're getting so much activity there. And then of course, the troubled properties, those are annually 100%.
And it's worth everybody noting that the violations are not all the same, that there are violations that are considered minor, and every property, including the mansions that are in the Potomac, all have some issue from time to time. The best run properties will always have code violations of some kind, whether, assuming they will be minor. But I guess, Keen, you're talking about the aggregate as well as the quality of those code violations, some of which
Correct.
could be health and safety risks.
Correct. Yeah. We basically, each violation, our inspectors go in and do an inspection. It's all back in the database, behind the scene. They actually have an app now. So they're actually in real time as they're doing the inspection, they're choosing what violation they see. That particular violation, let's say, for instance, carbon monoxide alarm is not there or is not working. Well, that is what's called health and safety. That has to be fixed that day or within 24 hours. Anything that's a high violation, they have to fix within 2 weeks. Medium and low, those can be longer. That's how that goes. And so something minor, not requiring an immediate response.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. And in between these annual inspections or every 2 year and 3 year inspections, renters, if you have something that you can't get the landlord or the property manager to fix in a reasonable period of time, you can get a code inspector to come out and deal with it if you file a code complaint within a reasonable period of time, correct? Keen?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as you said earlier, Matt, it's always good for the resident to call the property manager or owner, give them an opportunity. But if they, don't follow through on the date or it's taking an exorbitant amount of time, definitely give us a call and we will get out there. We typically, a lot of times inspectors call the next day, or I've got a lot of inspectors call the same day. But at least within 5 days, we're if it's not a priority, someone will have contacted you and we're setting up an inspection.
Well, thank you very much. Frank Desmarais, anything else to add?
No.
Well, in that case, thank you very much. And now I guess we'll move on to a critical part of our agenda tonight, and that has to do with those people who are facing eviction or may be facing eviction because you're behind in your rent. And so we'll turn it to Joanna Miller from the Health and Human Services Department, who is managing that program and answering questions in the chat all this time. Very much appreciated. Joanna Miller.
Thank you so much, Matt. Yeah, I am. Well, I was going to share my screen with some slides. It looks like I don't have that access tonight, but I am happy to talk about what is going on with the rent relief program at this point. So a couple of things that I just want to make really clear. To qualify for the program, there are 4 basic criteria. You have to have experienced a loss of income due to COVID. You have to meet our income threshold. So if you're earning $1 million a year, you don't qualify, but depending on the size of your household, you may. You have to owe your landlord at least $1,000, and you must have lived in Montgomery County since at least August of 2020, if not earlier. Now, what I did want to clarify is that obviously there is a lot of concern from folks who would like to be able to find out more about the status of their application. And I do appreciate that it has taken some time for us to get through applications, and we appreciate your patience on that. Right now, we have only been processing applications from individuals who are already facing eviction. And because there have been a great number of folks in that situation, it has just kept us very well occupied. So when I talk about folks who are currently facing eviction, I mean they have received a warrant of restitution or they have received a red and white eviction notice. What we are hoping is that starting next month, we will be able to start processing applications from individuals who've been unemployed for more than 90 days and those who live in certain high need census tracts around the county. You can see more about where those high need census tracts here, where they are using that link. But just to clarify, facing eviction means you've received one or both of these documents. We do know that a lot of landlords have sent out messages to their tenants that are intended to pressure people into paying back rent or to move out. Unless your landlord has actually filed a case in court and you have received a document like this one in the middle, they actually have not legally started the process of evicting you and they cannot throw you out. And so I just want to make that clear when we talk about folks who are facing eviction, it means that you have received one of these documents. I seem to have just moved on to the wrong slide. So a quick overview, this is the information that you need to have if you complete an application for rent relief. And 2 points that I want to make are that in most cases, if you are successful in your application, we will send the money directly to your landlord, not to you. And both you and your landlord should be notified of the decision in your case. In the meantime, while you are waiting for a decision, and I know that's very difficult, you can check the status of your case online. And if it hasn't changed, please don't worry that we have missed you or that somehow your application got lost. Please know that we have been looking exclusively at folks who are facing eviction, as I mentioned, as well as identifying duplicate applications so that we can remove those from consideration. But when you ask us for a status update on your case, the information that's available online is the exact same information that I have access to. There's no additional information that we're withholding. Literally what you see is what I can see as well. We've got lots more information about what your case status means, as well as how to apply, and FAQs about our program, all available on the website here, mc311.com/rent relief. The most commonly asked questions that I have received lately: is the rent relief program going to end, and is it going to run out of money? Look, someday this program will end, but what I can tell you is that we do not have an end date in sight yet. If you have not applied, we certainly urge you to do so sooner than later. But right now we are not planning for an end of the program, and we do not see an immediate end to the funds available to tenants. So please know that there's nothing to be concerned about in terms of us running out of funding before we look at your application. If your contact information has changed since you sent an application in, that is something that we need to know about. In those cases, please feel free to send an email to hss@montgomerycountymd.gov just to let us know what your most recent contact information is. We also know that there have been a handful of occasions where folks disagree with the decision that has been made in their assistance application. In those cases, we would ask you to send an email to us at that same email address, HSS, which stands for Housing Stabilization Services, at montgomerycountymd.gov, and let us know that you would like to appeal the decision. That's also what you can do if you have been assigned a caseworker but have yet to hear from them. Most of the time, what that means is just that they haven't started actively reviewing your case yet, although it's been assigned to them. We have 50 caseworkers, and most of them are managing around 100 applications at a time. So just because a case is assigned does not mean that they are always able to start reaching out right away. If you are awarded funds, as I said, the money will most commonly be sent directly to your landlord. The only time when that money is not sent to the landlord is if your landlord has refused to participate in the process. And in those cases, what will happen is that the check will be sent to you instead. But that's something that your caseworker will clarify with you before that check actually goes in the mail. And the good news is I can leave us on a high note here with our most recent numbers. We've received roughly 7,000 unique applications. We've received certainly more than that have been submitted to us, but in going through looking for them, looking for duplicates and looking for folks who are ineligible, there are about 7,000 unique tenant applications. We've gotten just more than a quarter of those already assigned and in process by caseworkers so far. And we've given out just about $11 million in support. We just ticked over that number a little bit today. It's going up every day. And we have sent that $11 million to just over 1,000 households, almost 1,100 households. So far, we've given out about 20% of the funds that are available to the program. Our average household is awarded just about $10,000. So that's actually a little bit lower than what folks are eligible for, but it depends really strongly on how much you currently owe your landlord and what your monthly rent is. So on that note, I will just try and leave things on that slightly higher note, but if you've got any questions, please do feel free to reach out to this HSS email address that's listed down here. I know many of you have been waiting for a long time. We do appreciate your patience and we have not forgotten about you. And we will do the best we can to get back to you as quickly as possible. So thanks so much.
Sorry, Joanne, I asked a question publicly that was just for you, but can you please remind folks when, if they were on the waiting list the first time and they didn't get it, when should they have applied again? If they're still wondering why they didn't hear back and they haven't applied a second time, when should they have done that? One, and two, if you received a certain amount of funds the first time, say 2,000 or 3,000, this program is up to 12,000. So should they reapply for additional funds?
Sure. So anyone who has applied to earlier versions of this program is welcome to reapply. So we ran 2 versions of this program in 2020, and then the program that we're operating right now is the 3rd phase. We were not able to roll over applications from previous versions of the program into our current version, and that's because we created a new online application system and we weren't able to bring old information into that new system. The good news is, though, even if you were awarded funds in earlier versions of the program, you are still eligible. While most households are eligible for up to $12,000 in funding, if you received, say, $4,000 from us last year, then what happens is we subtract that amount that you were given previously from the total amount that you are eligible for now. So if you received $4,000 last year, 12,000 minus 4,000 equals 8,000, and that's how much you would be eligible for this time. One caveat I will make to that is that if you are a very low income or no income household, you may actually be eligible for additional funds on top of those $12,000. So sometimes it may vary, but in general, most folks are eligible for up to that 12K.
Wow, very good. If there are questions for Joanna Miller from Health and Human Services, please put them in the chat. And if there are questions for code enforcement, Frank Desmarais, the Deputy Director of Housing, is with us, and Rosie McCray Moody is still with us. Now would be the time for any questions or concerns. Let us know. Because if we don't see any, then we're going back to TV. I would, Joanna, what's the best contact for you?
Sure. So at this point, most of the questions that I receive are specific to individual cases. And most of the time, what I will say is that you need to contact us at our general inquiries inbox, and that's our HSS email address that I have mentioned a few times. Madeline, I will get in touch with you one-on-one just so that we can take a look at your case. But I often am checking the HSS email inbox, and when I'm not, one of my colleagues is, and she will flag things that I need to take a look at. So that's the best way to reach me.
Thank you, Joanna. Frank Desmarais, do you have any final remarks for our evening?
Generally, I like to close with, again, the kind of the opening support for everybody here going through difficult times, and to repeat that you're not alone in terms of having to figure out the resources and try and access the resources. So please, the county does have organizations under contract with us, trained, standing by, willing to come out to buildings, working with you as individuals or your community to help you understand what's available. There are more resources than just rental resources. The county has food resources, there's energy assistance. So this is a very deep economic and very difficult issue, health, etc. So the key is getting people connected with that. Websites are good. The information, calling 311 can connect you with resources. The organizations such as Renters Alliance that we've identified. So we strongly encourage everyone to take advantage of all of that. And it's going to be a difficult period, as we work our way out of it. And the county's committed to maintaining everything we can. And we do need to hear feedback. As Joanna was speaking, we know, it is a processing and a time challenge with respect to getting rental assistance out. The process that you have available to you on the landlord-tenant side, the court process, working with your landlord. Landlords don't want to take back empty units. They really would like to work with existing tenants and get paid back rent. We're trying to connect our landlord community to that information. If you have landlords that need better connection to that, please try and connect them with the county through those websites. We'll do everything we can to try and help you and your landlord work through the time that it's going to take to bring these, this support to you. So again, thank you very much for everybody participating, and we absolutely want to respond and support. So please contact us, and we'll see how to best connect you with that.
A couple of quick questions came in as we were talking, Frank, that probably should be addressed. Maybe Rosie or Frank or Joanna can address it. I think we said that if you received funds earlier in the program, Joanna, correct me if I'm wrong, that those funds will be deducted from your total eligibility. So I think that answers that question from Naveen. I'm sorry, from an earlier question. And somebody asked if the landlord receives funds in the rent relief program, will it stay the eviction, or is there a delay in the eviction? What's that status?
Good question. So if we are able to award funds to you through the rent relief program, and a landlord is pursuing eviction against you, we ask them to drop that eviction altogether. And if your lease has expired during the time that you owe them rent, we require them to renew your lease for 90 days. You are not required to stay there for that whole time, but they are required to give you that grace period. And I also had seen a question about what to do if the amount that you owe your landlord exceeds the $12,000. While we do work to negotiate landlords down a little bit, and we ask them to forgive 10% of the total debt, certainly we have seen cases where there are folks who still owe $6,000 or $8,000 even after we are able to help them out. And so in those cases, while we don't have funds immediately available to help you, what I strongly suspect is likely to happen is that as we move into the fall, we will be launching some additional programs to help folks who are in those situations. And once we get to a point where we are able to formally announce that, you would be welcome to reapply to those programs. So just keep an eye out on our website, touch base, and we'll let you know as soon as we know what our next steps will be.
And Joanna, we probably neglected to mention this because we're just talking about the COVID rent relief program. But any renter in Montgomery County who's facing eviction, even if you're not COVID eligible, there is support at HHS. Joanna, can you tell us about that?
Indeed, there is. So we have a number of different programs going on. If you are in a situation where you know that you are going to be evicted, and you don't foresee your landlord actually being willing to accept funds from our program, Montgomery County is not going to let you be homeless. No one is going to be out on the streets. So what we have in some cases are funds that will allow us to help pay for your moving and storage costs, in addition to your first month's rent and security deposit on a more affordable home if you're able to identify one. Obviously, if push comes to shove, we will find room for you in a county shelter, or we will rent a hotel room for you and your family. But if you are facing eviction in the very short term, please, please, please reach out to 311, which is the county information line. Let them know that you are facing eviction in the very near future. And what they will do is make sure that the Housing Stabilization Services team is made aware of your situation, and someone will reach out to you ASAP to help you come up with a backup plan. Again, while the goal of my program is to prevent eviction specifically, Montgomery County has a very real commitment to not allowing people to go homeless, and you will not be out on the streets. So please don't be afraid to reach out for that help if you need it.
Thank you for that, Joanna. I think that's very important, since not everybody is impacted by COVID, but we are in an economic crisis in many ways, especially for people on low income. I just want to say this is a rock and roll time in terms of consistency. The eviction orders have come and they've gone, and now we're not sure how long they're going to last. We're pretty certain the CDC order will be lifted at the end of this week, I think. and that the governor's order is expected, and there's no indication otherwise that it'll last longer than August 15th. We don't know if Councilmember Jawando's rent stabilization bill will be extended for a year. That hearing will come up in September. We don't know what the resources of the Biden-Harris administration are in terms of addressing this eviction crisis beyond making the Treasury rules more flexible so that local municipalities can adjust their programs to move funds out as quickly as possible. We don't know what powers they might employ other than the CDC eviction order to help stem the tide of evictions that are coming. But the report out today is that we're looking at upwards of 10 to 11 million people in the United States who are facing eviction over the next several months. And it's going to be a very trying time for local, state, and national government to address this. And so we ask you to stay tuned and come back to our next Renters Alliance Town Hall. Please reach out to your neighbors, have them sign up to these events, sign up to the Renters Alliance newsletter. It's rentersalliance.org. If you are having issues in your building for maintenance, contact first the property management or the landlord, but then code and have them follow up. If you have an issue with your lease, if you're not getting promised or required services, if you believe your rights are being violated, the Renters Alliance is always there to help guide you through that, to advocate for you. And of course, the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs is there to mediate and enforce the law in the county and in the state. So with that, if there's any other comment from our panelists, I want to thank Chris Perry, my vice chair, is listening in from our board as well. But if there's nothing else, Frank, no?
Again, thank you very much, Matt.
Okay. Thank you, Joanna Miller from Health and Human Services. Thanks, Frank Demaray, Deputy Director of Housing and Community Affairs. Thank you, Rosie McCray Moody from the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. Thank you, Council President Hucker. I know you're listening somewhere. And thank you, Keen Nichols, Supervisor from Code. And of course, all of Council Member Hucker's staff, who's also listening in somewhere. Thank you very much. And with that, good night.